Still does the cutoff. Alright, I think the stream's up. Still on the terrible laptop setup. I don't have my mic. I'm still traveling. But we're here. So yeah, feel free to ask any questions. I'll probably go maybe do a high level overview of the homework. But I don't really want to touch on recursion too much unless there's any questions, because I think the lab kind of does all you would probably need to know on recursion. Important concept, and I think you kind of mentioned that last office hours too. It's good to know in terms of like your computational thinking sense, and you might encounter it a couple of times in the wild, but it's probably likely if you're going to be coding something yourself, you probably won't make use of a like recursive solution for it. Which is why in the lab that I have these two functions, which are also very popular, to kind of demonstrate iteration, like an iterative solution compared to a recursive solution. So to kind of see the trade-offs between the two, and I feel like most people just kind of go with the iteration one, but you know, it's not necessarily case. Yeah. I provided some resources here. I mean, recursion is definitely tricky, especially tracing through it is kind of a pain. There is that nice visualizer tool that could help if you wanted it. Let's see, Python tutor. Yeah, I think this is it. Yeah, so this URL up here, you can like basically type in your Python code and then you can like visualize it. Let's see if that'll work. Yeah, and so then you can like step through it, and it kind of keeps track of these variables for you and shows you the kind of print, so you can walk through it. So that might help kind of walk through these recursive solutions as well. Just pythontutor.com will take you there. Really cool site made by Philip Guo, who's a huge name in the kind of CS education community. Then I keep having to go back here to this YouTube live screen to make sure there's no questions because I'm on one display. But yeah, that's recursion. Lab kind of covers it pretty brief. It's the homework. Which is to solve kind of tic-tac-toe. I did maybe provide a little more scaffolding than I should have for this. I kind of wanted to just honestly release the homework and we'll say like, hey, make the game tic-tac-toe, starting from scratch. So I did include that as an option if you're feeling a little ambitious. Didn't mean to have two dots there. But yeah, so that's one option, right? You can just make tic-tac-toe from scratch, as long as it kind of follows a similar input thing. But also I wanted to give this kind of templated code so that you could build off of, since I know we're still learning things, and that we hadn't really used input right here, right, to actually get information from the user. So I wanted to include that for you, and use it in a while loop and hopefully have it not cause too much confusion. But you still have to kind of think through like the logic of this game, right? Even though it's a fairly basic game, it still has some logic, checking for the win conditions, when to stop asking for a move, how to know when a move is valid, right? So that kind of stuff I think is super useful. And then kind of taking these ideas, like taking this game, right, which is pretty simple and you probably have played it a decent amount of times, and then converting it into the different like logic elements that are required, and then converting those to code. So I think games like this are, also kind of fun. Like I'd rather program this game kind of thing than a math problem. But I think they are really good examples of getting you to, kind of write these different functions that all come together to make this one program. So tic-tac-toe I think is a good example for that. Right. So someone said, wondering if you can walk through how tic-tac-toe should work. So it's a two-player game and not a computer versus user game. That's correct. So you should like run it, and it'll give you. I lost my page. When you run it, it'll like put this input out. Right. Please enter the space. Make your move. And so that's just the starting player, which is going to be X, I believe. Yeah, right here, X. So, once you have all the code in place. But I guess even if you don't have the code in place, this will still prompt you for a move. Then I give a valid move, like move to position 1, and it draws the X, and then it should change the active piece over to 0 or O, and then, the same prompt should come back up. So it's like a two-player game, right? I mean, you can imagine, I guess, passing your laptop off to a friend or whatever. But yeah, the idea is it's just you. There's no, like, AI. I also considered kind of making it have AI, but I thought that might get a little, I don't know, you can go down the rabbit hole of that, and I didn't want to be too confusing, so I was like, if we just have this one player side thing, because if you did AI, you'd still have to have this, which is like getting the input from yourself, and so I figured it'd make it kind of less work to not have the AI. But honestly, if you are feeling if you're feeling ambitious or whatever, and you want to have, you do the moves and then program like a basic AI, I think that's fine. If you just like leave me a comment at the top of your code, or even if you didn't, I guess when I was running it, if I like input 4 and then I see a computer makes a move as well, and then I get to make my move, I mean, that's fine. But I guess a comment would be nice to know. But yeah, I felt that could be more challenging, but I think that's kind of cool stuff though. I mean, a lot of intro to AI courses kind of start with like Pac-Man or kind of tic-tac-toe, and I think tic-tac-toe is perhaps like the lowest level of kind of the AI stuff. And I mean, there's like simple ways you can do it too, where you can just basically iterate through your list and try to find the first empty one and then make it move there. Right, so that's like some basic computer AI playing the game. But then there's smarter moves, because there's kind of a heuristic to one tic-tac-toe, right, where like if you go in the middle, that's better. Then I think like diagonals are like the second best move, and then third best move are like these, the 1, the 5, the 7, and 3. So you can incorporate that into it. But yeah, I guess the original intention is just basically like you play both players by inputting the number when prompted, and that's why there's this change active piece that gets called. And then I had, so there's these instructions. I actually had like all this as comments in the code, but then it was like getting too big. So yeah, the basic idea is you have this start function, which you should call when it's running. I would actually kind of show the code running myself, but if I pull it up now, everyone will see the solution file. Says kind of like a downside of having my one screen right now. But you call start, and then if we run up here again, we can see start kind of has this code initializing these variables that you should probably use. But basically this while loop should continue running until the game is over, which is why it does some stuff here, and then when one of these conditions is kind of met, that we or not met, I guess, so we leave the while loop, then it's game over. So in this while loop, you should be calling these kind of functions up here to do stuff to play the game, which kind of these comments get to. So you call start, and then basically it should kind of like immediately prompt you, or you can draw the board, I guess, too, but it should prompt you for a move. So maybe you'd want to call get move, and then if we look up here and get move, this again kind of has this while loop, right? Because move is blank, while move is blank. So while we don't have a valid input, go ahead and ask the user for a space, and then you're going to want to check to make sure that space is taken. And again, I think I said this, but you can assume that you'll always get the values 1 through 9. Like no one's going to input 20 or like 55, so you don't have to worry about that. So you can assume you won't get like an index error, basically is what that's saying, if you do something to the number. So yeah, and then if you do get like 5 and 5's already taken, then maybe you need to do something so this while loop keeps running until we get a valid input. And then you should, if it is valid, you should make the move, which is drawing the piece on the board. Then you want to display the board, which we have here already. Once you put the move in, then maybe once the move's done, we need to check for a win to see, hey, maybe after that last move, the game's over, someone won. And also, if the move is successful, you're going to want to change the piece, because if it's an X that gets placed into the value of 5 right here, and it's good and we didn't win, then let's go ahead and change the piece right to the O, so then the next move that's made, it's an O on the board. So kind of try to again build off this, like coin flip was the initial kind of calling these helper functions from other functions, and I feel like this is more of a concrete, realistic example that also kind of has a lot of this logic in here that I really like. And I mean, I guess it's not just me, a lot of people like kind of tic-tac-toe, hangman, and Scrabble as kind of being first steps toward like bigger programs for a variety of reasons. They're recognizable as games. They're kind of fun to program. They do entail this breaking down of the game logic into lines of code and stuff. So I think it's a good example. So I hope everyone likes it. And I think you'll actually probably get a kind of similar thing for the next homework. Maybe a little bigger. But same kind of thing where it's like all these functions come together for one program, and hopefully something fun. Maybe some people enjoy like more just solving math programs rather than like making a game, but I feel like games are pretty fun. And again, you don't have to follow these kind of functions I have here. You're totally fine to just start your own kind of file I guess I would still want to start. Like if you do make your own, make it where it's at least easy for me to run. So like hopefully I would just have to call a start and then kind of do the same stuff. But if you want to do your own functions, you want the board to display a little different or something, you're welcome to make it your own. I do kind of auto run these assignments as well as look over them. So if the auto running fails or gets some weird errors, I also just visually look over everyone's code for a little bit. So shouldn't be that big of a deal. Which, speaking of which, the grades are coming. It's super hard to grade with my workflow on this single laptop in this conference I'm at. And I want to make sure I'm not just being like, oh, the auto grader says you pass, so you pass. I like looking at everyone's code so I can give meaningful feedback, because even if you pass the auto grader, maybe there's the way you're doing this loop could be done a little better. Maybe it seems that you're having a confusion about something, or you leave me a comment that I need to read. So I like to actually get in the code that you guys write and look at it. But as a result, it does take a little more time. But if there was something major, I would have like emailed y'all by now about it. But I think everyone's doing pretty good on the last homework stuff. So should let me get back to this. Totally forgot. So should each move print the updated board? Yeah. So you should. Yeah, I guess there's no technical standard that was really implied for how often the board should draw. But the idea is, which I'll also type in case someone comes after this, after every move, the board should be drawn. Because you just imagine, too, if you're playing tic-tac-toe and like you make a move and it's X, and now it's someone else's move, they're probably going to want to see the board, right? So I would say draw the board for sure. But I also don't think I explicitly kind of say that in the instructions. So like, if you've already done it or whatever, I'm not going to count off. But also it shouldn't be that hard to kind of throw in the draw board. For change active piece, I'm able to change X to O and O to X, but when I call it again, the variable changes back to what it was originally. Any hints? Yeah, I do actually. I think I actually ran into the same problem when I was doing that. So don't forget that you can assign variables to be like a function, right? So we return X. So then if I have, good, I have a test file open. Make this 5, right? And then we'll do return 5. Let's run this. x equals 10, x equals is 5, now x is 5, right? So you can do something similar with change active piece. That you can maybe do something like right here, maybe assigning it to a function that returns something. Yeah, I was gonna type that out too, but I don't know. I think it's time-stamped enough. If someone saw the question, I think I answered pretty close to when you asked it, I hope. Yeah, also if you haven't done the lab, but you are struggling with recursion, this video is great, but I would definitely, what also kind of sucks about recursion is that like the good intro kind of base functions are like everywhere on the internet. But they're good for a reason, but they're like so easy to find. So I would love if everyone could just like try the lab before doing any kind of Googling, right? Or searching. Because I think once you see it once, you're like, watch this video, or just like literally Google. I think if you probably Googled recursion, it's like the second choice, I bet. But like, once you see it and then you're like, oh no, I know how to do that. But really a better check for your understanding would be to like, you try it before seeing any of the examples at all. But at the same time, I know it's like, I don't know, it's super easy to find them. So even by accident you could, but I still think they're really good examples. So, and there's still learning to be had even if you like already see them. So don't feel bad. Oh, quiz also definitely did not come Tuesday. I think I will just throw out the quiz actually. So I'll still post something to give a nice resource, because I kind of mentioned this too. I just wanted this quiz this week to go over a concept that we probably won't really use in this little intro course. But I think it'll be super useful to know for PUI, and so I kind of wanted to throw it in. But I couldn't really find any good pre-made materials for it, and even like the intro W3 schools and stuff for this concept were still like a little high level, or like a little more complicated than I'd like. So I'll provide some resources soon if I can find some, and if not, I'll just make some on it. But don't worry, and I should probably post an announcement of that too, because I have people asking. And it's not fair to keep y'all waiting and have that as the same due date. So don't worry about the quiz. Grades for that are fine. So I'm getting busier at this back-to-back conferences than I thought. And I already have kind of the homework fleshed out a little bit for next week, but I do want to see how everyone does on tic-tac-toe first, because it's in a similar-ish vein. I think it'll be fun, and it'll be a little lengthier, and it'll be like the final homework. So we'll see on that one. Yeah, but for this, throw everything kind of in this while loop, right? We call start at the beginning to run it, and then this while loop basically should continually run until there's no more moves available, or we have a win condition met, which is kind of what this is getting at, right? So then you need to, also really sorry if you can hear these birds that are just squawking so loud. So we'll want to call start, and it should basically just dive right into this while loop and start running. you should, you could maybe draw the board first to show, hey, it's a blank board, or you could just go right into asking for the move. And then, move has its own logic of making sure it's a valid move. And if it is, then we should make that move and then maybe change the active piece over, or check for a win condition first. There's a little ordering going on there. And again, if it's not a valid move, we should let the user know, like, hey, this space is taken, pick a different one. So this while should run until we have a valid move, right? Because in tic-tac-toe, you don't just like lose your move if it's already taken. So just kind of keep prompting the user. And this, in case, so input is really great for Python. I don't think it'll actually be that useful for like PUI. What am I looking at? You could have been here. So this is just a way to kind of get input from the user. Whatever they enter in becomes basically like a string. So you could put a prompt in here, or you can just say input, and it'll basically just give you like your cursor there, and whatever you type in becomes like a string. So you assign it to a variable. So even if I did, 5, this becomes a string 5, right? So it's like, can't type there. Also, I forgot I have my own. So it becomes like that, right? Even though I just input this, it becomes a string. That's just because that's what input does. So you can do things like this, but you can't do this. So that's why, because you can't add an int to a string, but a string to a string is totally fine. And so what this is doing, int, is so, input, please enter your space, is taking in whatever we input, which is just going to be 1 through 9, but it's a string when we type it in, as we've seen. So what int, open parenthesis, close parenthesis does is it casts that string to an integer. So we can kind of see that here, get 5, and now we'll do that. And you can see when it's printed out, it's like denoting it's a string right here, but when we cast it, but again, so that's just cast, so we're not changing the value of x, right, because we're not reassigning it. But if we did something like this, now x becomes the int, right? But this is just basically saying, hey, treat this value as an integer. And it has to be on something that's like a valid, like the word 5 would not work, right? Because it's not like a base 10 number. But that's kind of beyond the scope of things. That's why I wanted to just go ahead and throw that in for you. Because I think it's a little... I also didn't want to have it where, like, the tic-tac-toe game, you'd have to keep calling this function and passing in a number 1 through 10. I'd rather you just, like, call start, and then you just enter the inputs here and not have to keep calling different functions explicitly from the shell. So it's like I'll just throw that one in. But if you were kind of like lost on like, wait, what is this input thing? I wouldn't worry too much about it. It's very small, this page. Yeah, start from scratch. Also, too, I know I say this, and I feel like I always say that I say this, but there's so many ways to solve programs, y'all, right? Especially tic-tac-toe. I mean, there's like just so many variations of you can do it in the different order you can do it, and like how you break these functions down. Like, the changing of the active piece, that little function could like be thrown in to, get move once a successful move or something. Then we could just already bake that code in there. So there's so many ways. So that's another reason why I felt like this was like the cleanest kind of structure from like a logic standpoint. And I was like, oh, and I still wanted to give some stuff you could fill out. But again, that's really why I also was emphasizing like, hey, if you don't like it, you can totally start your own. You can start from scratch or use a couple of these and kind of tweak it. Because at the end of the day, with like, most programs, hey, if it works, it works. You're trying to, especially for kind of prototyping stuff that you might do in the MHCI program, behind the scenes, that's where the code is. So like what the user sees and interacts with they don't really care as long as it's working and making this kind of intuitive experience for them. So if you have 20 functions that plays tic-tac-toe with them versus like 2 functions, as long as they can play this game and have fun and you can get all the stuff you want, it doesn't matter to them. So it's kind of how code works. That being said, you shouldn't just have one big function that plays tic-tac-toe, because you want to keep things readable, right? It helps with debugging. You just don't want a single kind of big function for the game. And I think that's it. Anymore, I'll probably stay on for like a few more minutes, assuming there's no more questions, but if there are, definitely ask away. But if it gets to like 2:30 EST, so 3 minutes, and there's no questions, I'll probably just go ahead and sign off. And I'll make an announcement that we're not going to have a quiz, but I'll just eventually update some resources that might help. Pooey. And I'll probably, I don't know when, but I'll probably go ahead and make some of these resources I was talking about that I couldn't find that I think will be helpful for Pooey. But we won't use them technically. When I call start function and refer to others, like get move, I get an error. But when I take the 3 definitions separately in a different function, it works. Any reason why? What's the error you're getting when you do So I get the first part, like you're calling these other functions from start and you get an error. So I'd like to see the error. But I guess I don't get the definitions, right? Because those are at the beginning of. So if you put stuff in the while, you're saying that you get an error, but then if you like remove these, you don't? Or are you getting an error with these 3 lines, like the board, piece, and win? Oh, I hate the way this like YouTube Live and YouTube Live thing looks. I'll cover it up with this. There we go. Also type here. I think there's like a latency thing with YouTube that I cannot turn off. Oh, doesn't recognize start. So what's the error saying? But that it's, is it doing like something like that? Like the name start is not defined? Yeah, it's a little hard. I think I get it. Let me grab this. So we're talking about. So also, you should be able. You don't need a tic-tac-toe. You should be able to just do like start and put the other logic in. But so you have code. Like this, right? And it doesn't recognize start. When you call it, so are you, does it tell you like it's not defined yet or whatever? Because you could potentially need to move, if I can find it. So like it may say it's not defined yet if you made like tic-tac-toe up here, because then maybe it's trying to run it and it doesn't know that start exists yet. So maybe if you put your def tic-tac-toe at the bottom, like below start, it'll be fine. So like, you know, below in my homework 5.py, if you put your tic-tac-toe stuff like here where my cursor is, then it should be able to recognize all of them. Yeah, something like, let me move this up so you can see. So you're getting something like this, name start is not defined, right? So we have like def start. Yeah, it's kind of annoying that the like placement matters for Python. I'm pretty sure it does. Let me do this little test right here. So, you know, then it found start because I had it above it, but I think it won't do it now. No, it still does. Yeah, so maybe it doesn't matter actually in Python. Is that the error you're getting though? Are you getting like the name start is not defined? It like may also be that sometimes formatting can get kind of weird, and like you usually do get a syntax error though, but sometimes if like with weird indentation, like this can get kind of wrapped into this function, or it's just like not complete. You know, you have like maybe something like that. Usually you get syntax errors on that though. So I would look around your start and make sure indentation's right and that it's like kind of closed and return something. I mean, in my little, so I actually did, I thought that function positioning in your file mattered for Python, but my little test just then said it did not. So maybe it's not the movement case. Yeah, right, it can't find draw board, but it can find start. think it would have to do anything in particular with the code at the start, but. Yeah, or maybe one of the comments is kind of causing an error. Some way. Fun times copying from a PDF into this. It's still probably going to give me an indentation error. Python, never change. Yeah, if you copying and pasting with Python is always honestly so terrible. So I definitely would suggest just running like or working from the. I need something in here. The homework 5 py file. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so I also didn't have anything in my while loop. So, right, it's like we're giving this while loop and we have the colon and it's expecting something there. And I did not have anything there. I just had comments. So it was like, hey, you know, the next piece of code to run would be this, and you can't have that in a function body. So that's what that error was. But presumably, yeah. So I mean, this is the code from start, and then I do have like the tic-tac-toe function. Does yours look like this similarly? Yeah, I guess technically there's this game over part, but you may need to put something in the while, but I would assume it would give you the error like I was getting. Because right now I would assume we get that, yeah, indentation. Yeah, no problem. That's formatting issues like that are like honestly my least favorite part of programming in general. And Python's kind of good. Well, Python's good for intro programming because it really does enforce this kind of structure. Because you'll see with JavaScript when you get into PUI that yeah, it's kind of all over the place. I mean, you should still probably follow the indentation kind of rule, but it won't enforce it. And so honestly, sometimes when you're just kind of hacking together code, you'll have code that kind of looks like this, and then maybe even the prints like on the same line, and it just becomes very unreadable. So it's kind of nice that Python enforces it, but then yeah, you can get some annoying stuff. But usually I'd say, so if I was trying to debug that, make sure like you're spelling it correctly, both in tic-tac-toe and that the function, that start is spelled like start. I like always do something like this and feel like I have this function start, but it's really strat. I'm super bad at that, and that'll give you that same error. I guess positioning doesn't have to do with it, which is weird. I could have sworn it did. Making sure like your loops actually have something in the bodies. And yeah, the indentation's good. But hopefully, I guess if it's not, definitely like post on Piazza or something, or like you can email me or do like a private Piazza post, and you can like post your code in there. And then maybe I could like walk through that. But definitely don't want you to be spending hours on some like formatting stuff. It's not the fun part, not even the learning part. It's just the frustrating part. Yeah, I'll do another. If there's any questions, I'll definitely stick around, but otherwise we'll probably sign off in like I guess 3 more minutes. But I'm definitely here till 3, so if there's something, let me know. No, Quiz 5 has not been posted. I'm just going to actually scrap Quiz 5 and Quiz 6. There's no like quiz for both of these 2 weeks. And my original plan was to just scrap it, like not have it at all. Then I was like, oh, actually this one concept I think would be useful for PUI. I'll make a kind of walkthrough quiz on it, hoping to borrow some materials that were already out there. But I honestly did not like what I was looking at. And I was a little too busy to kind of make them myself, so I'm just going to scrap the quiz, but I will still eventually point toward a useful resource, hopefully, if I can find one. Otherwise, I'll just honestly make a little walkthrough myself. But we wouldn't use like the concept anyway for this course. I just think it's kind of a nice to know for PUI. So I'll still throw it out there eventually, but there's no real rush on it or anything. And yeah, I also giving it out so late, I could like push the quiz due date back, but I know people have all these busy schedules, so it's not fair to your time also. So there will be no quiz 5. I'll need to post an announcement on that, and I will do that right after office hours, because I don't think I can in student view right now. Yeah. Module 6. That's the next week one, I think. I don't want to go to OLI right now because it'll be my instructor view, and I don't want to like have all this information there. But yeah, so these last two units, like the recursion one, and then I believe the data structure one that does have the arrays, which I think you're talking about. Yeah, so that is from this part of like programming courses that are like language agnostic, basically. So it's more of the like concepts and stuff. Trying not to get too much into like the language of Python. So like with the recursion part, right, there wasn't these like usual code snippets that we've had, but it's still like walk through the examples, and that's why I have the lab do the two kind of recursion cases and actual Python code, since you technically didn't get any practice with it. But yeah, it's still obviously very pertaining to Python. It's just these last two modules are trying to be less kind of centered in the Python programming language, which is also an intentional move too, because I guess this is supposed to prepare you for PUI, which is not going to be using Python. Although you I think will have some Python options, but most of it's going to be like JavaScript, and so what counts there is the ideas. And what's also really great about programming is like once you kind of learn one language, like Python, it's super easy to kind of, not super easy, but it's not as bad to like transfer and learn and read other languages. So like to do a for loop or a while loop, or addition, subtraction, all these weird parse a string, make a list, all that in JavaScript is super similar to Python, like super similar. So that's another reason where you could there are programming courses out there that technically don't focus on a language at all. It's just kind of these concepts and ideas, and then you take them and apply them to your given language, like Python or Java or JavaScript. That's kind of what these last two modules are leaning towards. Also, if I ever say anything is super easy, I don't mean it. I feel like I have a bad habit of that, but honestly, nothing is easy. Would you recommend spending the rest of the summer learning more about Python on my own, or should I start learning JavaScript to prepare for the fall? That's kind of hard. So I think for some of your other courses too, it'll be the case where you'll want to make these kind of like interfaces or like work with code in some way, and you'll kind of have the option. So I think Python also can do a lot. I know Python can do a lot of like data processing stuff. So if you think you'll ever get into any of like the data side of things, like processing kind of big data sets or trying to do some analysis on there, Python's great for that as well. But if you think you'll just want to do like more interface kind of mock-ups and have them, I want to make this interface that has these buttons and I want to see where users click and how they do it and all that, that would be more JavaScript. But I think definitely Python is the best first language to learn, and it really does transfer. If you really do understand these concepts in Python, to transfer them to another language such as JavaScript, it's honestly I don't want to say easy again, right? It's not bad. So if you understand like manipulating strings and prints and returns and a variable assignment and calling these functions from other functions and embedded while loops and for loops, and that kind of stuff in Python, and you do have a solid understanding of it, I think doing the JavaScript stuff won't be bad. And honestly, what we cover here is like that's like a lot of programming. I mean, you can see here these things like lambdas, like, I don't know what that is, or regex, and it's like regex actually you might need to do some things with it, but like all this other stuff like try except you don't need to know, or for kind of prototyping stuff you don't need to know lambdas. Lists are like defined data structures. Maybe sets would be useful, like probably not tuples, but yeah, I wouldn't be too worried. We already kind of did a solid base on Python, so I feel like if you can find a Python course out there, I think that's a good way to kind of build up your programming knowledge, for sure. But I do think, I think the hard part of like maybe going into PUI and using JavaScript is like using JavaScript to write a for loop is super similar, right? But it's like also slightly different. Like when you're writing JavaScript, you're not going to be like having idle, for instance, and indentation doesn't matter, and and then it's like parentheses for it. So you would do something like this, right? And then you don't need like colons. So there's like some tiny nuances that are more like syntactical in JavaScript, but I think like Python is more of like a programming language, but it does depend on what you want to do with it. Like if you think you're just wanting to learn more about a language, so then you can like make this web page that has these interactive events and do stuff like that, then I would say probably JavaScript's better. But if you just kind of want to like build up your base of programming knowledge, so then you could use Python or transfer this knowledge to JavaScript, or maybe you don't know what language you'll be wanting to use, if at all, but you do want to have this kind of knowledge of programming and build up your computational thinking skills, then I would say Python, if that helps. So I think it kind of depends on what you want to do with it. And I know there's a ton of people, I know I even used to be like this, where it's like, I am learning this programming stuff, but like really that's not like what I want to do. Like I don't want to be writing code. I want to do more of like the design side of things, but you still are going to need to like communicate with people that will be writing this code. So that's like kind of a communal cool thing. And I think knowing Python would be fine then, right? Because if you're like more of a designer or like a management position or something like that, and we have this product, we have this interface, we have this app we're designing, and I really want it when I scroll this menu down for this thing to occur. And then maybe you're kind of developer person or persons will be like, oh, well, if we do that, we'll have to break this big loop we have, or we'll have to add these other functions from this. And it's like you'll need to not know how to speak it per se, but it helps to kind of have an understanding a little bit. Like you don't have to like talk shop for programming, but to kind of or like if you're working and like the developer struggling on something, if they can like talk it through to you and you understand like the for, the while, like what these files are, it's nice to have these kind of skills too. And then I would say if you're that where you like just don't really want to write the code, you want someone else to be doing it, which I feel like a lot of people are, and it's totally fine, then just having that kind of base Python knowledge, I think, would be more sufficient than diving into JavaScript. Also depends too kind of on like what courses you want to take. So if you've already looked at like the course schedules or have an idea of what you're going to take in fall and spring, then you could also look if there is any programming requirements and if they do enforce a language. I know a lot of the data science courses at CMU make use of like Python or R. So if you were taking a class in spring that says, hey, a prerequisite is this Python course, or we'll be using Python in this course, then, maybe that's like another point for why you should stick with the Python. But also with PUI, Jason knows that like this course is in Python, and so there's going to be a little like transition time on like, learning the syntax bits of JavaScript that are slightly different from Python. So I wouldn't say you have to feel like you need to go brush up on really JavaScript or anything, because there's like 40 people in this current class that are all learning this Python as well. So there's I don't think Jason's gonna have this assumption that everyone knows JavaScript or anything. And if you find some resources and you want me to like kind of vet them, I totally can. I feel like I actually get asked like at least twice a week, like, hey, like where should I go to learn programming? And there's so many good resources, so many bad ones too, on the internet, that I usually tell people like, hey, if you find something that piques your interest, let me, send it my way, and I'll just do a quick pass on it, and I'll just give you my quick summation of it. Because some people work better when it's like, oh, I'm learning Python through the development of this game because I'm really enticed. Some people like it, oh, I want to build a web page. They usually have like some other goal in mind for like why they'd want to learn the programming, and so that definitely kind of dictates like what resources you would use to learn it. Alright, so I would say there's a lot of good stuff out there. It just depends, if you really like the game stuff. There's so many courses on learning, intro programming in Python or JavaScript or whatever, that are kind of contextualized around building a game or games. And there's ones that do that for kind of like more interfacey web apps, or, there's a bunch of stuff on like, hey, build your own app, starting from like, no programming knowledge. So it kind of depends on the goals as well. But if you have questions on that kind of stuff, or you find something and you want to send it my way, I can totally give you my opinion on it. Maybe I've heard of it before. So yeah, I can try to help with that. I do a lot of kind of computer science education research stuff, so I feel fairly knowledgeable about that. But alright, it is 3 o'clock. I've got to run. I actually think I have a Piazza question or two I need to answer right now. We'll get to that, and I'll be checking Piazza again today, probably right before dinner-ish time, maybe like 6. So feel free to post on there whenever, but just know I'll probably get back to you around 6. Yeah, otherwise I'll just check it probably tomorrow morning. And then tomorrow we have the lab, which the time is shifted, I believe, right? Yeah, so kind of like this time, 2:30, 3:30. Same kind of deal. We'll go through the lab and answer any questions. I think going through that lab will be super quick, but because it's not that many functions comparatively to other ones. And then probably just answer any questions. I don't know if I'll really. I feel like I did as much of kind of a high-level walkthrough of tic-tac-toe as I can without giving away answers. So I might just kind of chill and answer any questions, but I'll see any of y'all to show up tomorrow. Good luck, and I'm going to go post that announcement right now that says there's no quiz 5, and I apologize for that. but I will, at some point before the course is over, give or make the resources that I had in mind for something that I think will be helpful for Bowie.